Representative James, on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, House Bill 438 is relative to the Baton Rouge Police Department and allows for some very small changes to the promotional class. I have an amendment that I would like for someone to offer to put the bill in its proper posture. Representative Marcel has a
Give
hand.
us a second there. I don't think we passed them out yet. Hand me one time. Thank you. 438. Let's give the amendment just a second to look over. It looks like it's technical amendments. Nothing. Hold on one second. I hear you, but somebody's got a button pressed ahead of you, Ms. Norton.
You got me on.
Point of order. I'm going to let you do that. Go ahead.
Representative Marcel had her hands up before we knew what the amendment was, and I want you to know that.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. Representative, Ms. Righteous on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amendment number 1536, members. If you look on page 2 of the bill, currently, the bill in its original form, on lines 1 through 6, we're going to be deleting those lines, requires the Civil Service Board to establish a committee to conduct interviews of persons who are among the 10 highest in departmental seniority. So we are deleting these lines that will delete that requirement for the board to create a committee. Amendment number 2 is technical. We're at the beginning of line 7 on page 2. We're changing C to B. Amendment number 3 on page 2, line 9. Currently, the bill says from among a person who is among the 10 highest in departmental seniority, and we're changing 10 to 5. In amendment number 4, we'll be deleting the rest of that bill, lines 14 all the way through 24. Because that is a reference to some provisions of present law, so we don't need those provisions.
Okay, I'll make that motion on the amendments. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Marcel, your button is pressed. Is it on the bill? Okay. Any opposition to the amendment? So ordered. Representative Marcel for a question. Go right ahead.
Okay, are you finished with your bill, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is a local bill, and I want to recognize our chief of police that's in the back. Would you please stand? And I think this is a great bill you have, Representative James, and it allows the chief the opportunity to look at a number of employees when it comes to hiring, to promotions, and I like it. And at the proper time, I'd like to move it favorably.
Thank you, Rep.
Okay, Representative Marcel, I'm going to hold that motion just for a second. We do have some, I want to read into the record. There's some people here that are in support. Well, let me correct that. It's a green card. Lamont Cole, you're here in support of the bill? I am. Come forward, please.
I didn't see him.
And how about Walter Griffin?
I didn't see Councilman Cole. How you doing, Councilman?
You want to come forward and speak on the bill? Come on down. If you don't mind, introduce yourself and for the committee, and you have the microphone.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in favor of this bill. As I'm sure all of you are aware, we've had our fair share of challenges in the city of Baton Rouge relative to community and police relations. I think what this bill does is create an opportunity for the chief to create a committee to look at the top 5 candidates who are eligible for the leadership position instead of just promoting the top candidate based on seniority. What we've seen and what we recognize is many of our members of law enforcement in Baton Rouge suffer from a lack of development because the leadership, while taking the position, did not necessarily want the responsibility to develop the people under his supervision. And so we want to make sure we get the appropriate candidate and look at the top 5 so we can do this work and make sure we improve and increase the quality of relationship between the community and our police department. So thank you very much.
I was fooling with my paper. Did you introduce yourself? I know who you are, Mr. Cole, but could you?
I am Lamont Cole, Councilman District 7 in Baton Rouge. Happy to be here. I could talk all day if you like.
No, you good.
Oh, okay. All right.
You're good. Yes, sir. Identify yourself, please.
Walter Griffin, Baton Rouge Police Homicide. I'm also the first vice president of Magnolia State Peace Officer Association. I wanted to relay our commitment with the chief, and also to echo what he said, illustrious Mr. Cole has said. We are totally for the changes in the promotional process, because over time we've seen that the lack thereof of a more professional promotion process has caused our department to deteriorate.
Okay. We do have a card filled out by Chief Murphy Paul. President would like to speak. Is that correct, Chief? Or are you just here for information? What do you want to do? You good? All right. I want to read into the record the rest of the green cards. Present and provide information if requested, Fabian Blanche. Present in support, not wishing to speak, Darrell Gissel. Present not wishing to speak, Logan Anderson. Present not wishing to speak in support, Kevin Hayes, Scott Kilpatrick, and Johnny Koch. We do have some red cards, and at this time, gentlemen, if you don't mind, we'll let those people come forward. First would be Chris, is it Stewart?
Yes, sir.
Come on down. Let me see if we got anybody else that's wishing to speak. I'll call them down. No, that's it. So, okay, Mr. Stewart, identify yourself, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Chris Stewart. I represent the International Union of Police Associations. I'm the state representative for municipalities across Louisiana. I also am here today in support of the members of the Baton Rouge Union of Police. Traditionally, they have their own representative here that represents them, but yesterday that person was sent back to patrol by the chief for some reason, and he's not available here to speak on behalf of their opposition, so I am here to do that for them. I worked at Baton Rouge Police Department for 20 years. I also represented their union for 14 years. This legislation has a large amount of problems that we would like to address and talk about. Probably way too many for me to take up your time with that, but the organization that represents the rank and file, the backbone of the police department, were not asked about the promotional system or what they thought about it. The union that represents them, with 93% membership rate, belong to this union, and were never brought in, never asked any questions, never sat at the table. The legislation was filed, and then they said, well, we can talk about it. This legislation does way too many things and is way too problematic to solve, and especially such a short session like we have now. So on behalf of the police union in Baton Rouge, and also the entire state, which I've seen numerous emails, received phone calls from agencies all over that I represent, they're in strong opposition of this because they see it, and I realize it's a local bill, but these are statewide changes to a statewide system, because it's Baton Rouge today, and tomorrow it's Shreveport, Lafayette, Lake Charles, and so on. This is not any kind of legislation that we can just enact today without talking. And I think it's bad faith on this administration to make such a drastic change to a promotional system without input from any of the organizations that it affects, including their own people, and the Office of State Examiners. They would probably have plenty of information to share with you about how problematic this is going to be to the entire system. And on behalf of the men and women, the rank and file of the Baton Rouge Police Department and the union, I strongly oppose these changes, and I wish that you would move to defer this until we can have some more time to sit down with the authorities and work out something. We're not opposed to doing that, but we can't come down here in one day and fix something of this magnitude. This is going to affect people's careers and livelihoods, and decisions like that cannot be made on a whim when there's organizations and a collective bargaining agreement, which also that agreement authorizes that union to have a representative here, and he was moved yesterday. I'm going
Right.
to finish it up, sir.
Okay,
But I
thank you.
strongly oppose this
Thank
on
you very
behalf of
much.
them.
Ms. Pat, you have a question for this person? Okay, you have the floor.
I have a question, and then I'd like to have Representative James come back to the table. But this was a local bill.
Yes, ma'am.
It was properly advertised and put in pre-file. That has been since early this year. My question is, does the chief have a open door where people can go and talk to him about things?
Well, it's both ways. Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Just does the chief? That's the
Yes.
question.
I assume he does, I would
if
hope.
this was a local bill and it was pre-filed, then why wasn't this dissension brought forward earlier?
Well, I believe they tried to meet and it didn't work out very well. And then, like I said before, the bill has so many changes, and it goes into such great length of career changes for these folks that work there in anticipation of where they're going to go in the future. You can't fix that in 1 or 2 meetings, ma'am. I would think something like this would be discussed months ahead of the session before anything's even filed or advertised.
Well,
I would
in
think that would have been the
January.
issue.
If Mr. Representative James
Mr.
can
Stewart is
speak.
entitled to his own opinion, but he's not entitled to his own facts. The facts are I met with the union in this building because the bill was pre-filed. I met with the union in this building. The chief met with the union on May 1st, April 23rd, May 2nd of 2018, November 19th, 2018, January 31st, 2019, because many of you were here last year. You know, I filed a bill and I wanted to do something last year. And the chief asked me not to because he wanted to meet. I don't know what Mr. Stewart was. Obviously, he wasn't in the meeting. Now, if the chief was up here, and if you ask the chief what happened to the person that was supposed to be here, the chief had a meeting. And you know what the president of the union did? Emailed that person and told him not to attend the chief's meeting. So that's why the chief sent him back to uniform patrol, because he has an issue with authority. Again, he don't have to like the bill. He's entitled to his own opinion.
Thank you.
But the facts are, he is wrong. He's wrong. He's absolutely false. And I would invite you, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
He's wrong.
Well, before I
and
get called a
and
liar,
don't know.
I would like to respond.
Well, I didn't call you a liar. I was about to, but you're just wrong on the facts.
All right, let me do a little timeout, okay? We got some cards I want to read into the record. They are present and in opposition, but do not wish to speak. Ed Parker with AFSCME. Nick Felton with the Louisiana AFL-CIO. Louis Wren, AFL-CIO. Ernest Stevens with the Louisiana AFL-CIO. Adam Kimball, Professional Firefighters. Shane Spillman, Professional Firefighters. Darrell Bosco, Fraternal Order of Police. And this one's not checked, but it is a red card. Chris Christensen, Smart TD. Members, we have another question. Representative Norton.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna let the lady down with the black and white take my time because she live here in Baton Rouge. I think that would be with the black and white on, the lady right there.
Representative Marcel already made a motion to
Oh, she
move
made a
favorable.
motion?
Yes.
Okay, does she want to take my time? Because I'm gonna pass on this. She
All right,
live,
Representative Marcel.
No,
You're a nice person, Representative Norton.
No, I would just, if there's no other speakers, I would just ask Representative James to close on this bill.
Thank you
And
for doing that for
Thank
me.
you very much. So,
Thank
thank you
you.
for your testimony, Mr. Chris. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I get a little passionate because many of you know I've been in this committee several times, and there's not a single person that has reached out to BRPD outside of probably Representative Marcel to talk about these issues. I have emails here, and this is not in my email chain. We're talking about 5 positions. I told you guys when I sat here last year, I was on a search committee for the chief of police. They had a young lady who could have been appointed the chief, the head of the department. But because of the seniority system, she has to wait to get promoted. But she could have been a chief. We're not asking for a wholesale change. We're talking about 5 positions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Of a force of about 600 plus. Who I support getting pay raises. I support them getting extra equipment for their safety. We're talking about 5 positions. Members, this has been an issue that the chief has worked on for over a year, that I have worked on for over a year, and I ask for your favorable passage to move this to the floor.
Thank you, Representative James. Representative Stagney tells me he had his button pressed. Representative Stagney, who's the question for?
Representative James, just a very quick question. I know you're passionate about this. You were last year. Did the governing authority issue a resolution on this?
They have not.
All right, thank you.
Representative Smith, I seen you jump up. I know you want to say something, so I'm going to let you. Thank you, Representative Stagney.
Yes, I have a letter that I'd like to read. It was sent to the committee members. I'm writing to express my support for HB 438 by Representative Ted James, which is scheduled for consideration today in House Municipal, Parochial, and Cultural Affairs Committee. Police Chief Murphy Paul will be there to represent me in committee. This is a common sense bill that will assist Baton Rouge Police Department by providing a fair and impartial process for conducting interviews and assessments for promotions of senior staff at the Baton Rouge Police Department. The intent of this legislation is to create a formal process that involves a series of interviews designed to test how well a candidate will perform in a specific supervisory position, which is a best practice when it comes to leadership for our law enforcement. It is my hope that you will agree that the creation of this formal process will benefit our police department and that you will support HB 438 in committee and on the House floor. Thank you for your consideration, and sincerely signed by Mayor President Sharon Weston Broome.
Thank you.
And one more thing, Mr. Chairman, members, the amendments came after the amendments were born in those meetings that the chief had with the union.
Okay, we have a motion by Representative Marcel to move favorable on HB 438. Any further discussion? Any opposition? So ordered. Congratulations, Representative
Thank you,
James.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
House Bill 438, relative to the City of Baton Rouge, providing over the classified police service and relative certification of appointments of eligible persons.
Without objection, Representative James.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a local bill. Members, most of you have received some correspondence on it. You received a letter of support from the Mayor President. You also received a card from the Baton Rouge Area Chamber. And what we're doing currently regarding promotions in Baton Rouge Police Department is based strictly on seniority. What this bill does, it only changes the number of eligible candidates for promotion, and it allows for the chief and the advisory board to select among the top 5 after those officers pass the civil service written test. Again, this is local bill supported by the delegation, supported by our Baton Rouge Area Chamber, and passed out of local and municipal unanimously.
For a question, Representative Horton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative James, so what you're trying to do is bypass civil service laws and regulations.
Just a minute, Representative Horton. Just a minute. Representative Stagney, why do you rise?
Point of order. I don't see it on the computer. Doesn't this amend the Constitution? I don't see that it says we need a 2/3 vote.
Yeah, if you're asking the vote that's required to pass the bill, it's 2/3.
Okay.
That's what you're asking. Yes.
That's what I'm. Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Representative Horton. You can continue.
And was it to what you said? I didn't know if it was properly advertised, as most constitutional amendments are.
The bill was properly advertised, Representative Horton.
But to set a precedent that bypasses civil service rules and regulation, that's colorblind, gender blind, it's all fair for everybody. Why do you want to bypass that process?
This is a bill that our local delegation supports. It's a BRPD bill that was locally advertised, and what my chief has asked to do is, as opposed to just someone sits there for 20 years and he automatically has to promote them, he wants to be able to look at additional things outside of just seniority. Our chief he's retired from Louisiana State Police, and they don't have a seniority system. He's been in office over a year. Last year, I filed a bill that would have completely changed the civil service. He asked me not to go back and change it. Over the last year, he's had several conversations with his department, from the union to outside consultants, and this is what they've come to be able to look at additional things. I'll tell you one thing that I witnessed in BRPD. I was on the search committee for the chief, and there was a lady who applied, and she could have been a chief. She was a corporal. The mayor could have appointed her to chief, but she can't be promoted to a sergeant, lieutenant, or anything else. But that woman could have been a chief. So that tells me that this system can be reformed, and that's what we're simply trying to do here, to give the chief the opportunity to select among the best candidates and look at more than just who's been on the force the longest.
Well, a mayor appoints from where they could have appointed someone that had been on the job 5 years if they so choose. But what you're trying to do, you do know, would set a horrible precedence unless you want to undo all civil service protections. Would set a horrible precedent to where people, they go up through the chain according to the civil service laws and rules and regulations all throughout the municipal and police fire departments in Louisiana. So I don't see how you could possibly single out one city to do such a thing. I think it'll be a breakdown, and all the people who work hard and go through all this process, you want to eliminate those. And you want one police chief, regardless if it's your police chief or mine, my fire chief or yours. It's a wrong precedence, and did you know?
I disagree with you. I represent Baton Rouge Police Department. I represent the city of Baton Rouge. I didn't want it to apply. I know on yesterday you weren't successful with trying to change civil service. I understand you might be a little upset about it, but I didn't. I chose. That's why we have a process to file local bills. The city of Baton Rouge, everyone that represents Baton Rouge is supportive of the bill, and if you brought something for Shreveport and your whole delegation was supportive, I will follow you.
For a question, Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Representative James. Representative James, this is a local bill, is that correct?
It's only for the city of Baton Rouge, BRPD, locally advertised.
And it was locally advertised, correct?
Correct.
And it came through our committee, and I don't believe there was any opposition to your bill. Is that correct?
We had some opposition from the union, from a guy who had been fired by BRPD who came to testify against.
Just one person, though, that came up, that I recall, that came up to the table.
We had a couple cards, and one person, and it's basically the union that's opposed to it. But like I said, we have a lot of other organizations that are supportive.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the Louisiana Chiefs of Police Association supports this bill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's more than one chief, right?
That's the entire association, yes.
That's everybody's chief, right?
As the association, correct.
As the association goes, right? Okay. And finally, this bill, once we pass it, would give the chief an opportunity, because sometimes we have a person that's maybe have the years, but they don't want to supervise people. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that issue, the chief, some of the members talked about that. We had a union representative that actually spoke in favor of the bill, and they've seen that in BRPD. Someone may have the years, but they don't want the extra accountability and authority.
They don't want all the red tape that comes with supervising people, right?
That's right. And I mean,
so there are other people that may be beneath them and have less years in them that may be qualified and want to do that position. Is that correct?
And this gives the chief the option. You could have someone that's 20-year military and they retire, and then they start working for BRPD, and the chief can't even evaluate the 20 years of military service. That person could have gone on
and they've already served our country and been a part of another organization. Let's just say state police. They could transfer, they could retire from state police and then come over to BRPD. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And then we couldn't promote them up because of the way it's structured. And these are only for 5.
It allows the chief to look at, as opposed to just one candidate, allows the chief to look at the top 5 and make a decision from there. Correct.
And that's it. Correct?
That's right.
The rest of the system will work as it already is in place. Is that correct?
The rest of the system is.
We're not changing civil service laws.
We are changing, but we're not. It's not a drastic change.
Not a drastic change. That's what I mean. Just the first 5.
Yes.
The top 5, right?
Correct.
Okay, and let me see if I got this correct. The mayor of the city of Baton Rouge is in support of this bill.
That's correct.
The Baton Rouge delegation is in support of this bill, right?
That's correct.
And the Louisiana Chiefs of Police is in support of this bill.
Yes.
And it came out of municipal and parochial without any objections. Is that correct?
Unanimous approval, and the Baton Rouge area chamber is supportive as well.
And the Baton Rouge area chamber, right?
I think we covered all of our bases.
I think you have a good bill. I think it's a local bill, and I like what you said. You know, did you know that when it's in your backyard and you have a better view of it, and it's your bill, then we typically support each other when it's in our backyards. Is that correct? If we're not changing anything for anybody else's department. Did you know?
I think that's why the process in place for local bills, that they, number one, be properly advertised in the jurisdiction, and number two, when the local delegation supports it as a matter of courtesy, so to speak, since I've been here, the body usually goes with the delegation that knows the best for their area.
And this bill has been properly vetted in a committee, right?
That's correct.
Thank you very much for bringing the bill, Representative James.
Thank you, Rep.
For a question, Representative Nancy Landry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative James, did you say that this bill would allow the promotion of people on something other than seniority, like their qualifications for the job and whether they're the best candidate for the job, rather than just the person who has put in the most number of years?
That's correct.
And did you know that that's one of the major reforms that we enacted in 2012 in other areas, like in education, where we wanted to promote or not lay off when there were layoffs the person with the least seniority, but keep the best teachers and allow superintendents to lay off, based on something other than seniority?
I recall. And I thought that
we're
that was
not
a good
often
policy.
in agreement on things, so I just really wanted to point that out to you. And I think you have a good bill here.
Thank you, Representative
I support
Landry.
your local bill.
Thank you.
For a question, Representative Steve Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Real quick, and I thank Representative Marcel. This isn't really eliminating anybody. All it's doing is, instead of the chief having his hands tied to promote, because he can only take seniority, it allows him to pick from 5 candidates. He can pick the one that he thinks is the I'd just soon not have any candidates. Let him pick who he thinks is the right person.
That's correct. It only allows for the chief to make a better selection with a more diverse pool. Instead of being told that this person sat there the longest, the chief can say, hey,
correct.
Corporal Carter or Lieutenant Carter, he retired military. He went on to receive a master's. He's been a star on the department. He's one that doesn't have a disciplinary record. He's one that receives multiple commendations. Maybe I should consider Lieutenant Carter as opposed to being told to promote Lieutenant James,
I agree.
because he's been there longer.
And I think it's the right thing to do. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Carter.
For a question, Representative Edmonds.
I'm worried.
Representative James.
Yes, sir.
Couple of things. Number one, you've said multiple times that the Baton Rouge delegation is for this bill.
That's correct.
So there's been a meeting where the Baton Rouge delegation came together and voted in favor of this. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I said. We
Okay.
didn't vote in favor of it, no.
Okay. I just want to make that clear, that this has not been a Capital Region move.
That's correct.
Has not been a meeting of any of all of us together that we said we're for or against.
We didn't take an official vote. That's
Good.
correct.
Second thing is that this is a constitutional change, is it not?
If the civil service rules in the Constitution, it requires 70 votes, then yes.
Okay, so earlier, did you know, in the digest, it says, present Constitution creates a fire and police civil service applicable to municipalities of over 13,000. So this would be a constitutional change that you're asking to make.
I'm asking to give the chief more authority in promotions.
And this goes to the vote of the people to do this.
If that's what is happening with a constitutional amendment, then I suppose yes.
I don't think that's what's happening. I think this is did you know, this is our vote. We would give them the authority to make this change.
The bill went to the proper committees. It was passed unanimously.
But it's not a vote of the people, is it?
It's a vote of the people in this room.
In this room, but not a vote of the people in an election.
If that's what you're telling me, I will.
Okay.
I'll guess that you're correct.
So, as we're currently now in the hiring and firing, can you tell us how? Because this going away, is it not going away from what is sort of typical civil service employment for police. Is that not correct?
Anytime we come here and change a law regarding police or education, we're going away from what's typical, so yes.
Yeah, so this is a new standard of hiring.
Yes.
Okay, so are you already hiring the police chief?
This has nothing to do with the chief. It doesn't state the chief. I'm not touching the position. I've tried to do that before. I wasn't successful in that. So right now, the plan of government says the mayor can hire and fire, but the law here basically still says that the chief is a civil service position. So we have discrepancies there. There have been other cities that have taken their police chief out of civil service. I haven't been successful in doing that, and that's not what I'm attempting to do today.
Right, so that has not worked that yet. Is the in the process of civil service process, are you changing you're obviously changing the hiring and the hierarchy structure, is that correct?
I'm not changing the hiring, I'm changing promotion. Currently today,
Promotion.
like let's assume we had a seniority system in the legislature. Bertha Lai, Sheikh Snyder, Bishop, they couldn't be chairman because they're in their second term. And if the speaker would have to mandate that only third termers that have been here long enough are our committee chairs. What I'm doing is trying to say, you know what, speaker, maybe that person isn't suited or maybe that person doesn't want to. So you could look at other members of the body like a Representative Bishop, Representative Bertha Lai, Representative Sheikh Snyder, who are in their second term, and maybe give them a leadership position. So that's simply what we're doing for the chief. Instead of saying promote that person who's been here the longest, look at other things as opposed to just seniority.
Right, and the mayor is in favor of this bill.
Yes, she sent a letter.
But the police union, they're not in favor of this bill.
I didn't get a letter from the union, but I would suspect that they want to keep the status quo, yes.
They stand in opposition. So the mayor's for it, the police are not.
The police union, their representative, the guy that testified, again, he didn't represent BRPD because he was fired by BRPD because he had some disciplinary issues because he didn't know how to keep his hands off of women, so he's been fired from BRPD. But he came and testified on behalf of the union.
So I'm not certain that is representing.
You could Google it.
I'm not certain that we're representing all the other police officers in the city of Baton Rouge with that statement. Did you know?
I'm definitely not, but I'm talking about the one person that came and testified against the bill.
Right, but I think they've made it pretty clear. Did you know that the mayor is in your corner for this, and the police union
It's not my corner. I'm not a Baton Rouge police officer. I'm simply carrying the bill. So this has absolutely nothing to do with me. You have a letter from the mayor. You have a letter from the Baton Rouge area chamber. I'm simply trying to carry out the will of the chief.
Right, the chief.
And allow him to be able to look at
but not the police union, not the police themselves. Or not the retired police.
I know that just like when we did this for teachers, the teachers didn't want a new system. They were comfortable, and I'm sure that BRPD union, they're comfortable with the status quo. We have a chief that came from state police that they don't have these archaic laws in state police. They don't operate from a union. They're able to look at additional things. So I think that same leadership and experience that led him to be the chief of Baton Rouge, now he's trying to implement things and implement his vision. And this is one small thing that I think in the toolkit for him to do a better job. Last year, you're on that committee. Last year, I filed a bill that would have completely upended civil service like some other jurisdictions have done. Other cities have made small changes out of civil service, and they've flown through this body. I didn't do that this time because the chief said, Representative James, don't do that. I've just gotten here. Let me go and let me think about how I want to change the department. And after several meetings that took place with the union representatives dating back to last year, they even went on a retreat. Meetings this year, I met with the union folks here in this body. I asked the guy, how can I change it? Well, I don't want you to change it. We just don't like it. I don't subscribe to just doing nothing, so I'm trying to do something. Right. And what I was giving some information regarding the Constitution. It's not a constitutional amendment, so it doesn't require a vote of the people, but it does require a 2/3 vote to pass.
Right. I just wanted to be clear. Did you know of these other issues since we're giving testimony on the floor of where people do or do not stand? Thank you, Representative James.
You're welcome.
For a question, Representative Terry Landry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative James, first of all, I think you have a pretty good bill. And I have just a little bit of experience with this hierarchy and how things work from having some, I was the appointing authority in an agency in my other life. And I fully understand, did you know how important it is for a police executive to be able to pick his team more or less. And I want you to help me with this, understand what we're asking today on behalf of the Baton Rouge Police Administration Chief. And I've gotten some interesting notes here from people who are in support of this bill. I think the Baton Rouge Area Chamber. I think I got a note from Lobby. I think I got, and I don't want to misname. Can you give me kind of a list of some of the stakeholders in this area who are for this bill?
The state chiefs of police are for it. Our mayor is supportive of it. The Baton Rouge Area Chamber, we've had extensive conversations. They're supportive of it. I believe you may have received a note. I've had conversations with Lobby as well. I'm not going to say that I don't know if they sent out a note since I've been here, but the conversations were very much in line with what Representative Landry talked about. We did something similar with teachers, and they weren't opposed to the idea.
I remember what Representative Landry said, and I certainly remember that debate. And I just find it ironic that we can pick and choose the union issues that we side with. It seems like it's selective circumstances when we want to side with the union, and in other circumstances we want to fight them. Did you know?
Yeah, and I agree. And in 2012, there were some versions of that bill I liked, some I didn't like, but this I felt was important. I think the principal knows best in the school, just like the chief knows best, and I wouldn't want to have to be mandated to promote someone just because they've been sitting on the force for 20 years when I have another person who is retired military, who has experience there, who's gone on several different trainings, has a master's degree, and have to overlook that person because of these rules that have been in place forever. And let's be clear, I understand employee rights, and I think that there's a place there, but I also think that we have to give leaders an opportunity to lead, and a part of that is knowing how to put the best people in place to lead a department.
And let me ask you this, the positions that this is going to affect, this is not every position in the department.
You're correct. It's not every position.
It's not the sergeant, it's not the lieutenant, it's not the captain, it's the deputy chief's position or administrative positions.
This is not a complete rewrite. We're talking about just giving the chief some flexibility. Last year I tried to upend the whole system, right? It's the chief that asked me to slow down and let him study the issue. And what we have from that years of conversations, many of which that were between the chief and the officers under his leadership, and this legislation today is the child of all those conversations.
And what positions? Can you just kind of share with it what positions we're talking about?
Well, what we're saying is if there's a lieutenant position that comes up, or one of the deputy chiefs, the mayor, the police chief isn't mandated in who to put in that position, and he could look at senior. We're not eliminating seniority. We're just saying in addition to seniority,
you're adding a merit base to it, based on education, experience, disciplinary actions, rather than just being a warm body and the ability to take a test. Doesn't measure a person's work ethic, doesn't measure anything other than he could take a test. Did you know?
That's right, and they could stay in a job for a while.
Well, I think it's a great piece of legislation for the capital city area. I'm not a member of this delegation, but I think it's a great piece of legislation, and I think if we're going to be agent of change and we want a productive police department, we at least have to give the people that are in charge and the appointing authority some flexibility to pick its managers and their rank. Did you know?
Thank you, Representative Landry.
For a question, Representative Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative James, HB 438, does it exclude those individuals who've been there for 15, 20 years or however many years?
It doesn't exclude anyone, Representative Jefferson. It only expands the pool of eligible officers. Doesn't exclude anybody.
When a police chief is hired, will this give him or her an opportunity to assemble their particular team members?
That's all it does. It allows that chief to come in, him or her, and put a force together to move that department forward. I can't stop telling the story of, we had a corporal who made the final round. She could have been the chief, but as a corporal, she has to just wait there to become a lieutenant or a sergeant. And I think that we can do better. Like this woman who could have been the police chief right now, but she can't be a lieutenant or a sergeant just because she hadn't been there long enough. But she had all these other credentials that allowed her to ascend to the top 4 or 5, and she could have been a chief today. But because of these rules, she can't be promoted. And we are simply giving the chief the authority to look at a rising officer, a smart officer, and be able to promote that officer.
And an officer who perhaps has military experience, who's perhaps done a few tours, worked through military police or et cetera, who will be able to provide that type of insight. This kind of expands it, doesn't it?
That's correct.
Okay. And in putting together 438, what did Baton Rouge or the city of Baton Rouge do to try to elicit information from the citizens and those involved?
We've had countless meetings about how to move our police department forward. We have several citizen task force that are assembled now, from church meetings to neighborhood association meetings. Since the summer of 2016, we have had many hours. I have sat in rooms with more police officers than I could count. I learned a lot. I learned that I was wrong about a lot of things that I wanted to do in 2016, even some things I wanted to do last year. It's a learning experience for me, and it has been one for our community. But what we have now is a community that's walking hand in hand with the police department, trying to make sure that they have all of the tools. They're looking at a raise. I want the same raise for those officers, that the ones that are opposing my bill, I want a raise for them because they deserve it. I want us to be able to have technology for their protection.
Excuse me, Representative James. Representative J. Morris, why do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, I know we hadn't adopted the 5-minute rule, but don't we have a 15-minute rule without?
Well, when he does his introduction, these are answers to questions now.
What is the 15? So my point of order is, what does the 15 minutes apply to?
When he comes up to do his introduction, we give him a reasonable time to do his introduction.
I see. So questions can last like all night.
Unless we're on the 5-minute rule, I'm not.
I got you. I'm not asking for it.
Yeah.
I'm not asking for it.
Correct.
I'm just curious.
And we only have one question left, so we're making progress.
Okay, there we go. Thank you.
For a question, Representative Marcel, I know it's your second bite at the apple. Could you make it quick?
Well,
I'm sorry, Representative Jefferson.
I don't do this often. Just excuse me, just a minute.
Sorry.
Okay.
Forgot about it.
He was finishing. And out of deference to my speaker, I'm going to cede to my distinguished colleague from Baton Rouge.
Thank you, Representative Jefferson. Representative Marcel.
I waive.
She waives. There are no other questions on the bill. For the floor on the bill, Representative Horton. For the floor on the bill, Representative Horton.
Members, this has nothing to do with my bill yesterday. This has to do with the civil service system that was adopted as a state, not by a city by city by city. The civil service rules are colorblind, they're gender blind. Seniority is everything. You could pull a police chief at any time will be changed by each new mayor that comes in. Are you going to change the rules according to what that particular police chief wants to do? They could choose anyone from a sergeant up, bypass all the people who have been hired and are working diligently, passing very stringent tests and evaluations to get to the position that they've earned through the civil service rule. This cannot be adopted for one city. It will go throughout the entire state because civil service is a state law. That it was adopted by the state. If a person does not want to be promoted, they don't have to accept that promotion. This is not personal against Representative James. If we want to do away with the whole civil service system, that's something you have to decide. But service system must keep its integrity as is. And that's all I have to say. Thank you. Thank you, Representative James. It's not personal.
For the floor on the bill, Representative Marcel.
Members, I am a member of the municipal committee where this bill passed unanimously. I think there's some confusion about us eliminating people. We're not eliminating anyone with this bill. Actually, it's Representative Ted James' bill, but I support the bill. It only gives the chief an opportunity to look at additional people in the first 5 positions. That's all it does. And let me go on the record as saying that there was someone there from the union, the police, the Magnolia Police Union. In fact, the chief did not even take the stand. They did, and they supported this bill. So I don't know where all of this is coming from. It's a local bill. It's been advertised. And by the way, on that same day, there were some positions that other chiefs around this state wanted to change positions to non-classified, and we do that periodically in municipal. You should visit us there. That's what we do when it's a local bill. So if that particular city comes to us and say, we want to change these positions and make them non-classified, we have voted to do that. I ask for your support on this local bill for the Baton Rouge City Police. Thank you, and that's why it's called local.
Representative James, to close on your bill.
Thank you, members. And Representative Horton, of course, I love you to death, even though you're wrong right now on my bill. You're still my good friend. Members, Representative Marcel, she hit it. We make tweaks here and there to the civil service when it's in the best interest of that community. Obviously, based on the questions, maybe one member from Baton Rouge isn't on board. I feel very confident that the other members are supportive here, just like our mayor, just like the Baton Rouge Area Chamber. We're not changing the Constitution. It's in Article 10, so it requires 70 votes. Members, I ask that you vote yes on this local bill and join the members of the Baton Rouge delegation who are supportive of this bill. And I ask for your favorable passage.
Representative James moves final passage of the bills. Many in favor of final passage vote yes. Those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Vote your machines, members. Representative Arms, yes. Representative White, yes. Representative Stokes, yes. Are you through voting? Representative Anders, yes. Representative Abraham, yes. Representative Leger, yes. Couldn't see you, sorry. Are you through voting? Clerk will close the machine. 83 yeas, 12 nays. The bill is finally passed. Representative James moves to adopt the title. Representative James moves to reconsider the bill finally passed and lay that motion on the table. Without objection, so ordered.